Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of strangers, judged before anyone truly knew you? Imagine sitting quietly, enjoying a game on your tablet, only to have a grown man towering over you, insisting you don't belong simply because of who you are. That's exactly what happened to 11-year-old Zoe Carter as she sat in first class, blissfully unaware that her mother, Maya Carter, had built an airline empire from the ground up. Now, imagine the choice. Do you cower? Do you argue back? Or do you wait for the moment when truth and courage collide? Zoe had no idea her mother would appear in time, nor that what seemed like a private humiliation would soon be witnessed by an entire cabin and broadcast to the world. Can you picture yourself in Zoe's tiny shoes facing blatant prejudice at 30,000 feet? Your dignity challenged in front of dozens of strangers. What would you do? Would you speak up, hold your ground, or feel helpless? This story isn't just about a seat on an airplane. It's about courage, respect, and the power of using authority wisely to protect the vulnerable. Join us as we unfold the unforgettable events of Flight 227, where a lesson in justice and empathy took flight. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to witness this powerful story from start to finish. The cabin of Flight 227 from Atlanta to New York was unusually quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. Most of the first-class passengers had already found their seats, stowing their sleek carry-ons in the overhead bins. The faint hum of the air conditioning blended with the muffled chatter of travelers settling in. It felt like the ordinary beginning of a business trip, until a voice sharp, condescending, dripping with contempt cut through the calm like a blade. "Move out of my seat right now. Little girl, you don't belong here in first class." Heads turned instantly. Conversations died mid-sentence. The air seemed to thicken, and every pair of eyes in the front cabin shifted toward the source of the commotion, a tall, middle-aged white man in an expensive but wrinkled suit, looming over a child. She was no more than 11 years old. Her skin glowed a soft brown under the cabin lights. A pair of pink headphones framed her face, and in her hands she clutched a tablet with the kind of nervous grip children use when they sense danger but don't quite understand it. The man's name, though no one in that moment cared to ask, was Gregory Barnes, 45 sales director, a man accustomed to barking orders and getting his way. His finger jabbed the air as if it were a weapon, aimed squarely at the small girl seated in 2A. The girl blinked up at him, stunned, unsure how to respond. Her name was Zoe Carter. Just minutes earlier, she had been laughing quietly at a puzzle game on her tablet, her legs swinging slightly because they didn't yet reach the floor. She had been, in every sense, an ordinary child until this stranger decided she did not belong where she was sitting. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances. Some frowned in disapproval. Others simply froze, paralyzed by the awkwardness of watching a grown man confront a child. A few discreetly raised their phones, recording what their instincts told them was about to spiral into something ugly. Gregory's voice grew louder. "Do you hear me? This is my seat. First class isn't for kids like you. Go back where you belong." The words struck harder than his tone. They carried the weight of history, the sting of exclusion, the arrogance of someone who believed status and skin color determined worth. A hush settled over the cabin. Heavy and uncomfortable, Zoe shifted in her seat, her small fingers gripping her boarding pass as if it were a shield. She looked down at the bold print Seat 2A, first class, and then back up at the man towering over her. Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. This is my seat," she whispered, almost inaudible. Gregory scoffed. "Don't play games with me. Do you have any idea how much these tickets cost people? Like me, earn the right to sit here? You need to get up. For a moment. Zoe wished her mother were beside her, but Maya Carter hadn't boarded yet. She had sent Zoe ahead with priority boarding, trusting the airline staff and the civility of fellow passengers. What Maya didn't know was that her daughter would become the center of a storm before she even fastened her seatbelt. A murmur rippled through the rows. An older man with gray hair in seat 4C leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. A young woman across the aisle covered her mouth with her hand, whispering something to her companion. Everyone could feel it, the wrongness, the cruelty of a grown man weaponizing entitlement against a child. Zoe tried again, her voice steadier this time. My mom got me this seat. It says 2A. She held up the boarding pass with trembling hands, offering proof to a man who had already decided not to believe her. Gregory sneered, leaning closer until his shadow fell across her. Listen, sweetheart, I don't know what story your mom told you, but first class isn't for you. Don't make this harder. Move. The silence that followed was excruciating, the kind that makes people hold their breath, the kind that demands anyone to intervene. And yet, in that suspended moment, Zoe sat frozen, caught between fear and defiance. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong. She knew this was her seat, but she also knew the entire cabin was watching, waiting, and that somehow, at just 11 years old, she had become the target of a stranger's anger. The injustice was palpable. It lingered in the air, like static, daring the next second to ignite into something irreversible. That was the moment our story truly began, the moment a little girl's dignity was challenged at 30,000 feet above the ground. And no one yet realized that the lesson about respect and justice was only just taking off. The story of that afternoon did not begin in the cabin of Flight 227. It began 2 hours earlier at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International, where the air buzzed with the constant rhythm of rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, and hurried footsteps echoing off the polished tile. Zoe Carter clutched her sketchbook with one hand and her mother's arm with the other as they walked toward the check-in counter. She wore a lavender hoodie with little embroidered stars on the sleeves. Her eyes, curious and bright, darted from the flight information screens to the long lines of travelers juggling passports and coffee cups. Are you sure I can board by myself? Mom Zoe asked, her voice a blend of excitement and nerves. You'll be fine, sweetheart, Maya Carter replied softly, her tone both reassuring and firm. Remember what we practiced. Show your boarding pass. Stay polite. And if you need anything, ask the flight attendants. They're there to help you. Maya was used to managing crises at 30,000 feet. As the CEO and majority owner of Phoenix Airlines, she had made countless decisions that determined the fate of her company. But in this moment, guiding her daughter through the simple act of boarding a flight felt like the most personal responsibility in the world. Zoe nodded and hugged her sketchbook tighter. Okay, I'll be brave. Maya smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. That's my girl. While they checked in at the priority counter, just a few feet away, another passenger was having a very different experience. Gregory Barnes slapped his passport down on the counter with a thud that made the young agent flinch. There has to be some mistake, he snapped. I've been flying with this airline for 15 years. I should have been upgraded. The agent maintained her composure. I'm sorry, sir. All first-class seats are already assigned. We can put you on the wait list if one becomes available. Gregory's jaw clenched. His tie hung loosely, as though he had tugged at it too many times. He had just come off a brutal call with his boss earlier that morning, a call that ended with the words performance review and probation. His pride was bruised, and every small inconvenience felt like another insult added to injury. "Do you know who I am?" Gregory demanded, lowering his voice but sharpening its edge. "I'm a sales director. I fly every week. This airline should treat its loyal customers better." The agent offered an apologetic smile, but her tone remained steady. "I understand, sir, but I can't override the system," Gregory muttered under his breath. Something about incompetence, and grabbed his documents back. As he turned, his eyes landed on Maya and Zoe at the priority desk. He noticed the way staff greeted them warmly, the way Zoe's ticket was processed without delay. He felt a twist of resentment. In his mind, this was favoritism, another example of the world denying him what he thought he deserved. What he did not realize, what no one in the terminal seemed to recognize, was that Maya Carter was not just another passenger. She was the woman whose signature appeared on every major policy at Phoenix Airlines, the architect of its survival through turbulent years, and the quiet force behind its current success. Maya, oblivious to Gregory's glare, finished checking in. She crouched beside Zoe and handed her the boarding pass. "Seat 2A, she said, pointing to the bold letters. "Window seat. You'll like it." Zoe's eyes widened. "First class." "Of course," Maya answered. "You deserve comfort on a long flight." A boarding announcement crackled overhead, calling for pre-boarding of families and first-class passengers. Maya's phone buzzed another urgent call she couldn't ignore. She kissed Zoe on the forehead. "I'll join you soon. Baby, go ahead with the early boarding." Zoe hesitated, but then squared her shoulders, clutching her pass. She approached the gate agent, who smiled warmly and scanned her ticket. "You're all set, young lady. Seat 2A. Enjoy your flight." As Zoe disappeared down the jet bridge, Gregory stood off to the side, watching with narrowed eyes. He still hadn't been upgraded. And now, seeing a child stride toward first class while he remained stuck in business, his irritation curdled into something meaner, something he hadn't yet put into words. On board, Zoe found her seat and settled in. Pulling out her tablet, she felt a flutter of nerves, but also a thrill her first time flying alone, her first time sitting in the front cabin like one of the important travelers she had always watched with quiet fascination. Meanwhile, Gregory ordered a whiskey at the bar near the gate. He scrolled through his phone, ignoring unanswered texts from his ex-wife, and rehearsed the speech he would deliver at a client meeting in New York. Yet beneath the surface, frustration simmered. The image of the little girl boarding ahead of him replayed in his mind. The unfairness of it stung more than he cared to admit. Back in the terminal, Maya's call with her European partners dragged on. She spoke with calm authority, outlining terms of a new alliance that could expand Phoenix Airlines' reach across the Atlantic. Her mind toggled between corporate strategy and maternal concern. She trusted Zoe to handle the short time alone before she boarded, but an unease lingered at the edges of her thoughts. Like turbulence, you can't see but sense in your gut. At that same moment, Thomas Reed, the retired teacher, shuffled toward the boarding area with a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. His face carried the lines of years spent both teaching and surviving. He noticed the man at the bar, the one with the scowl and the whiskey glass, and shook his head. Some people, he thought, never learn patience. He had no idea that in less than an hour, he would witness a confrontation that echoed the battles of his youth, a reminder that prejudice had not vanished, only changed its disguise. And so, the stage was set. A child, her powerful but unrecognized mother, a bitter man clinging to his pride, a watchful flight attendant, and an elder who had seen too much history to stay silent. They were all heading toward the same cabin, the same conflict, the same truth, waiting to be revealed 30,000 feet in the air. The boarding gate for Flight 227 opened, and the announcement came through the speakers. Now boarding our first-class passengers. The crowd began to shift, a current of movement toward the jet bridge. Business travelers clutched their briefcases, families wrangled children, and a few people with diamond-level memberships strolled confidently forward. Zoe Carter was among the first to line up. She tucked her sketchbook into her backpack and adjusted the strap nervously. The gate agent gave her a reassuring nod, scanning her boarding pass once more before pointing her toward the jet bridge. As she walked down the narrow corridor, Zoe's heart thudded with excitement. The hum of the aircraft grew louder with each step. She had flown before, but this was the first time she'd sit in the section she had always passed on the way to the back, the place where the seats looked like armchairs and the trays came with real silverware. Inside the aircraft, the cabin smelled faintly of leather and fresh coffee. Soft lighting illuminated the first-class section. Zoe found seat 2A by the window, her favorite spot. She slid into the wide leather chair, her legs dangling a few inches above the floor, and let out a breath. She pulled out her tablet, opened a drawing app, and began sketching the view out the oval window, the curve of the jet bridge, the ground crew in neon vests guiding carts across the tarmac, the endless sky above. Not far behind her, another passenger approached the plane with a very different energy. Gregory Barnes moved with a restless impatience that seemed to ripple around him. His carry-on bumped against his leg as he strode toward the boarding door. The whiskey from the terminal bar lingered on his breath. When the flight attendant at the door welcomed him with a smile, he didn't return it. He barely glanced at her, muttering a brusque yeah as he flashed his boarding pass. His eyes scanned the cabin quickly, as though searching for something or someone. Elena Ruiz, the lead flight attendant, watched him from the galley. She was used to reading passengers quickly. It was part of her job. She saw the clenched jaw, the short temper simmering beneath the surface. She made a mental note to keep an eye on him. Zoe, oblivious to his presence, kept sketching. She didn't notice the way Gregory glared when he spotted her in seat 2A. He slowed his pace, his frown deepening. To him, the sight of a young black girl sitting comfortably in the seat he had long coveted was like fuel thrown onto smoldering embers. Meanwhile, Thomas Reed, the retired teacher, stepped into the cabin with a slower, steadier rhythm. He offered a gentle smile to Elena as he passed. "Long day already?" he asked kindly. She smiled back. "We're just getting started." Thomas found his seat in row 4, storing his satchel carefully in the overhead bin. He had always loved traveling, even in his older years. But what he valued most now wasn't the destination. It was the stories he gathered along the way. As he settled into his seat, he noticed Zoe up front, her headphones on, drawing with quiet concentration. A small smile tugged at his lips. Children had always been his favorite students. The stream of passengers continued. Laughter here, complaints there, the typical shuffle of boarding. Yet under the surface, an unease hung in the air. Elna felt it. She glanced again at Gregory, who had taken his seat in 3C with a scowl that seemed etched into his face. His hands drummed impatiently on the armrest. She also noticed Zoe traveling alone. Flight attendants often looked out for unaccompanied minors. And though Zoe wasn't listed as one officially, she was old enough not to require it. Elena still felt a quiet responsibility. Something in her told her this girl might need watching over. The boarding process dragged as usual, too many bags, not enough overhead space. Gregory muttered curses under his breath when another passenger struggled to lift a roller bag above him. Zoe glanced up briefly from her sketch. She heard the sharp words, felt the tension in his voice. She shifted in her seat, her fingers brushing the boarding pass still tucked in her pocket. For a flicker of a moment, she wondered if she had done something wrong. But then she remembered her mother's words, "Stay polite. You have every right to be there." She steadied her breath and bent back over her drawing. The last passengers trickled in. The cabin door closed with a firm thud. The captain's voice came over the speaker, welcoming everyone aboard. Flight attendants moved through the aisle, checking seatbelts and storage compartments. Zoe put away her tablet for a moment and gazed out the window. The afternoon sun glowed across the runway, turning the pavement golden. She let herself feel proud that she had boarded alone, that she was sitting up front, that she was doing something new. In row 3, Gregory shifted restlessly, stealing glances at the girl in front of him. His resentment simmered hotter, but he said nothing yet. Not until the plane began to taxi. Not until his frustration tipped over into words he could no longer hold back. And just a few rows behind, Thomas Reed adjusted his glasses and pulled out a small notebook. He liked to jot down thoughts during flight's observations, phrases, bits of poetry. His pen hovered over the paper as he looked up once more at the girl in 2A. He didn't know why, but he felt he should pay attention. Something told him that this flight would not be like the others. The wheels of Flight 227 rolled away from the gate. The faint vibration of the engines traveled through the floor, a steady reminder that soon they would rise into the air. Passengers buckled their seat belts, adjusting pillows, pulling out headphones, flipping through glossy magazines tucked in seat pockets. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the flight might proceed as ordinary as any other. But then, the simmering resentment in seat 3C finally boiled over. Gregory Barnes leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the back of Zoe Carter's seat. He had stared at the number 2A enough times on his upgrade request to feel entitled to it. And now, seeing a child, a black child, occupying it, his frustration finally found words sharp enough to pierce the hum of the engines. "Hey," he barked, his voice startlingly loud in the hushed cabin. "That's my seat you're in. Move." Zoe jumped at the sudden demand. She turned in her seat, wide-eyed, her headphones slipping down around her neck. "Excuse me," she asked softly. Gregory's jaw tightened. "You heard me? This is 2A. That's my seat. Get out." The man's tone carried no trace of doubt, only authority, as though his declaration alone could erase the ink on her boarding pass. Zoe blinked, her fingers automatically reaching into the pocket of her hoodie. She pulled out the paper pass and held it up, her hand trembling slightly. "It says 2A. This is my seat." Gregory's eyes flicked to the slip of paper, but his sneer deepened. "Don't play games. First-class seats aren't for you. Someone probably messed up. Show me a real ticket." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Passengers turned in their seats, eyes darting between the girl and the man towering above her. Thomas Reed, from row 4, leaned forward, his weathered hands gripping the armrest. He had heard that tone before decades earlier, in classrooms, in restaurants, in neighborhoods that drew invisible lines around who was welcome and who was not. His heart clenched with recognition. Elena Ruiz, walking briskly down the aisle, caught the last part of Gregory's demand. She paused, her professional smile fading as she read the tension in Zoe's face. "Sir," Elena said firmly, stepping closer. "Is there a problem?" Gregory straightened, puffing his chest. "Yes, there's a problem. This kid is in my seat. I've been a loyal customer for years, and now I find someone sitting where I'm supposed to be." Elena extended a calm hand toward Zoe. "May I see your boarding pass, sweetheart?" Zoe handed it over quickly, relief flickering in her eyes. Elena scanned the slip, then met Gregory's gaze. "She is in the correct seat. 2A is assigned to Miss Zoe Carter." Gregory's face darkened. "That can't be right. I asked for 2A weeks ago. I put in a request. I should be sitting here." "I understand your frustration," Elena replied, her voice measured. "But the system has her name on this seat. You'll need to remain in 3C, as indicated on your boarding pass." Gregory's nostrils flared. "Do you know how much money I spend on this airline? Do you know how many miles I've earned? And now you're telling me a child." His voice dripped with disdain. "A child gets priority over me." The words stung more than Zoe wanted to admit. She sat frozen, her boarding pass once again clutched tightly in her hands. Her chest rose and fell faster than before, the courage she'd felt earlier beginning to slip away under his glare. Thomas Reed finally spoke. "Sir," he called from his seat, his voice carrying the authority of decades in the classroom. "She showed her ticket. She's where she belongs. You need to let it go." Gregory whipped around, his eyes narrowing. "Mind your business, old man." A few passengers gasped. One woman clutched her phone tighter. "Hitting record." Another whispered, "Unbelievable," shaking her head. Elena stepped in front of Zoe, her posture straight. "Mr. Barnes, I need you to lower your voice. You are upsetting other passengers. Please return to your seat." Gregory crossed his arms defiantly. "Not until this mistake is fixed. Call your supervisor. Call whoever you need to. I want proof that she actually belongs here." The word belongs hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Zoe felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she forced herself to sit still. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "You have every right to be there." She swallowed hard and whispered, mostly to herself, "I do belong here." Gregory didn't hear her, or maybe he didn't care. The cabin, once filled with the casual chatter of travelers, now sat under a heavy silence. The engines continued their low rumble, but inside, the atmosphere felt like a taut string about to snap. Passengers glanced at one another, silently asking who would step in, who would break the tension, who would defend the child sitting alone against the storm of entitlement bearing down on her. For Zoe, time seemed to slow. Every second stretched long, filled with the weight of eyes watching, judging, waiting. She wanted her mother. She wanted this man to leave her alone. But more than anything, she wanted not to cry, not to show fear, not to give him the satisfaction of seeing her small. And so she held her boarding pass tight, as if it were a shield forged from paper and ink, the only proof she needed to know that this seat, this place, was hers. The murmur in the cabin had grown thicker, like static in the air. Elena Rui stood with practiced calm, her hand resting on the back of Zoe Carter's seat as though anchoring the trembling child in place. Passengers leaned out of their seats to see more clearly, the glow of phone cameras catching the tension in fractured frames. Gregory Barnes crossed his arms, unyielding. "This isn't over," he said, his voice quieter but more dangerous than before. "You can tell me whatever you want, but I know something's wrong. She doesn't belong in first class." Elena steadied her breathing, lowering her tone to one she often used with agitated travelers. "Mr. Barnes, I understand you're upset. Let's resolve this calmly. Your seat is in 3C. Miss Carter's ticket is confirmed for 2A. If you'd like, I can bring a supervisor once we're in the air. Gregory's mouth twisted. A supervisor? Do you think I'll just sit back while you people ignore me? Call one now. The words "you people" landed hard. A woman in row 1 glanced at her husband, whispering. Did he really just say that Zoe kept her eyes down, staring at the floor? The boarding pass in her lap was already wrinkled from how tightly she had been gripping it. She wanted to disappear into the wide leather chair, to vanish into her drawing, anywhere but here under his glare. She heard her mother's voice in memory, sweetheart. People will sometimes question your place. Don't let them decide for you. You know your worth. But she was only 11, and right now, her voice felt too small. Thomas Reed leaned forward again, his weathered hands folded on top of his cane. Sir, you've made your point. The young lady has her ticket. It's time to let this go. Gregory turned, his eyes narrowing. You don't know what you're talking about. Thomas didn't flinch. His voice was steady, not loud, but firm, the way it had been when settling disputes in a classroom. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've seen this before. Don't make her carry the weight of your anger. Elena raised a hand gently, hoping to redirect. Mr. Barnes, if you'll please sit back down. We'll be ready for takeoff soon. Let me bring you a glass of water or something stronger to help you relax. He scoffed. Don't patronize me. I pay for my seat. I expect respect. Several passengers shook their heads. The man in 2B, seated beside Zoe, shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing the situation would resolve. Elena crouched slightly so that she was eye level with Zoe. Her voice softened, warm and protective. You're okay, sweetheart. You're in the right seat. You don't need to move. Zoe nodded faintly, her lips pressed together to hold back tears. She whispered, almost to herself, My mom will be here soon. Elena offered a small smile. I'm sure she will. Gregory rolled his eyes. Her mother great. Let's drag this out even longer. From behind. Another passenger spoke up. A young woman with short curls, holding her phone steady, said clearly enough for half the cabin to hear, We all saw her ticket. Leave the kid alone. Gregory shot her a glare, but the murmurs of agreement spreading through the rows told him the tide of sympathy was not on his side. Still, he refused to yield. He jabbed a finger toward Zoe's ticket. How do I know that isn't fake? Anyone can print something out these days. That was when Zoe's composure finally cracked. She lifted her face, her eyes glassy but filled with fragile defiance. It's not fake, she said, her voice trembling. This is my seat. My mom said so. Her words were soft, yet the cabin heard them. A silence followed, heavier than before, the kind that demanded resolution. Elena straightened, her eyes locking on Gregory's. Mr. Barnes, I need you to return to your seat right now. If you refuse, we'll have to involve security. Gregory's laugh was hollow, sharp. Security? For asking to sit in the seat I deserve. This is ridiculous. The engines whirred louder as the plane continued taxiing. Every second without resolution pulled the atmosphere tighter. Zoe wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. Her heart pounded, but she clung to her mother's voice echoing in her head. Stay polite. You have every right to be there. She whispered it again, this time under her breath. Steadying herself, I have every right to be here. From his seat. Thomas watched her closely. He saw the battle inside her, the fear of being humiliated, and the fragile courage of a child deciding not to crumble. It reminded him of marches long ago, of children who had stood on the front lines of change with nothing but their small voices and their truth. Elena knew the confrontation was far from over. She could see it in Gregory's tense posture, the way his fists clenched and unclenched. But she also sensed the eyes of the cabin turning against him. For now, she guided Zoe back into her seat, adjusted the safety belt gently, and said, "You're safe. I'll handle this." Gregory huffed, but finally dropped into 3C with a sharp thud, muttering curses under his breath. The cabin exhaled collectively, though no one truly relaxed. They all understood this wasn't finished. It was only a pause, a fragile calm before the real storm, and Zoe, staring at her reflection faintly visible in the window, silently wished her mother would hurry. She had never needed her more. The boarding lane quieted as the last cluster of passengers stepped into the jet bridge. Among them walked Maya Carter, her phone still in her hand from a call she had just ended with her chief operating officer. Her stride was measured, heels clicking against the floor, her tailored navy suit hugging her frame with crisp professionalism. She was tired. It had been a relentless week of merger talks, but her eyes softened when she thought of Zoe waiting for her up ahead. A mother's instinct told her when her child needed her, and something in her chest urged her to move faster. When Maya entered the aircraft, the cabin seemed to shift. Heads turned not just because she carried herself with authority, but because tension still lingered in the air from the earlier confrontation. People were whispering, gesturing subtly toward seat 2A. Maya's eyes went straight to her daughter. Zoe sat rigid in her seat, iPad tucked against her stomach like a shield, her face pale but determined. Relief washed over her features the second she spotted her mother. "Mom," Zoe breathed, her voice cracking in that mixture of exhaustion and hope only a child could have. Maya bent down, brushing a strand of hair from Zoe's forehead. "I'm here, sweetheart," she said gently. "You did so well. I'm proud of you." But her gaze lifted almost instantly to Gregory Barnes, whose glare still hovered over the scene like storm clouds. He sat in 3C, body stiff, arms crossed, eyes burning with indignation. "What happened?" Maya asked softly, though her tone carried steel. Before Zoe could answer, Elna Ruiz stepped forward. "Ms. Carter, there's been an incident. This gentleman insisted your daughter didn't belong in her seat. We verified her boarding pass multiple times, but he refused to accept it. Security may need to be called." Gregory leaned forward, sensing his chance to reassert himself. "Finally, an adult. Look, lady, there's obviously been a mistake. Your daughter's sitting in the wrong seat. I've flown this airline for years, and I know what first class looks like. Kids like her don't." He stopped, realizing too late the weight of what he had just said. The murmurs around them swelled like a tide. Maya straightened slowly, her presence filling the narrow aisle. She looked down at him not with rage, but with the cool, unflinching control of a woman who had weathered boardrooms full of men like him. "I beg your pardon," she asked, her voice quiet but razor sharp. Gregory shifted in his seat, suddenly less certain. I just mean, these seats cost more than well. They're not for children playing games. That's all I'm saying." Maya's lips pressed together. She let silence hang long enough for the truth of his words to echo in the cabin. Then she said evenly, "What exactly makes you think my daughter doesn't belong here? Her age, her skin, or simply because she's not you?" Gregory's jaw worked as though searching for an escape. "You're twisting my words. I never said you didn't have to," Maya cut in. Her tone was still calm, but its edge was unmistakable. "You made your assumptions clear. And in doing so, you humiliated a child who had every right to her seat. Zoe clutched her mother's hand, her small fingers trembling. Maya squeezed back, grounding her. From row 4, Thomas Reed spoke again, his voice carrying the gravitas of decades lived. "She's telling the truth," he said, nodding toward Zoe. "We all saw it. That man spent 20 minutes tearing her down because he couldn't stand to see her sitting where he thought she didn't belong." Other passengers nodded, murmurs of agreement building. The young woman with the phone added, "I recorded the whole thing." Gregory flushed red, his confidence slipping as the collective weight of witnesses pressed against him. But pride clung stubbornly. "This is being blown out of proportion. I just wanted my rightful seat. I'm a loyal customer. I deserve respect." Maya exhaled slowly, centering herself. She had choices: unleash the full measure of her power now, or let him trap himself further. Years of leadership had taught her the silence could be the sharpest blade. She let him twist, Elena interjected carefully, sensing Maya's growing presence. "Miss Carter, I can have security escort him off if you'd prefer." Gregory scoffed. "Escort me off?" For asking a simple question. Maya finally leaned closer, her voice low enough that only those nearby could hear. "Mr. Barnes, you've mistaken this cabin for your kingdom, but respect here doesn't bend to your entitlement. It belongs to every passenger equally, including my daughter." Her words landed heavy, quiet, but undeniable. Zoe's chest swelled with something new, not just relief, but pride. Gregory sneered faintly, but his hands fidgeted against the armrest. For the first time, doubt cracked through his armor. Zoe whispered, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, can we just sit?" Please. Maya kissed the top of her head. "We will, baby. But first, this needs to be clear." She turned back to Gregory, her eyes unflinching. "You will not speak to my daughter again. Not a word. Do you understand?" The businessman faltered under her gaze. For a moment, it seemed he might argue again, but the collective disapproval in the cabin, the phone still raised, the authority radiating from Maya all pressed down. Finally, he muttered, "Fine." The cabin seemed to release a breath. Elena guided Maya toward her seat, ensuring Zoe was comfortable again. Passengers exchanged knowing looks, many realizing they had just witnessed more than a simple seating dispute. But Maya knew this wasn't over. Gregory's pride had been checked, not extinguished, and her instincts told her the true confrontation was still ahead. For now, though, she focused on Zoe, stroking her hand until her daughter's heartbeat steadied. The flight hadn't even taken off, and already the lesson was seared into the air. Dignity was not a privilege to be granted, but a right to be defended. The cabin had settled into a tense hush, but beneath the quiet, a storm still gathered. Maya Carter sat beside her daughter, Zoe, one arm draped protectively across the child's shoulders. Her composure was unshaken, but inside, she was calculating. Years of steering Phoenix Airlines through crises had taught her that chaos was best managed not with anger, but with strategy. Gregory Barnes, however, couldn't let it go. Though he had muttered his reluctant fine, the bitterness in his eyes told another story. Every glance he threw towards seat 2A carried the sting of indignation. His pride was raw, his authority undermined in front of a captive audience. Elena Ruiz remained alert in the galley, keeping a cautious watch. She had seen entitled passengers before, but something about Barnes felt more volatile, as though humiliation had only sharpened his resolve. "Mom," Zoe whispered, her small hand gripping Maya's, He's still staring at me. Maya looked down, her voice low and steady. Sweetheart, when someone tries to make you feel small, the best answer is to remember who you are. You belong here. Don't ever doubt that. The words soothed Zoe, but they also traveled further than Maya intended. Thomas Reed, seated 2 rows back, nodded subtly, his eyes moist. He had spent a lifetime telling his students similar truths. Hearing them again, spoken with such calm certainty, reminded him of why those lessons mattered. But Gregory wasn't ready to surrender his stage. He leaned forward, his voice loud enough to carry, "You think this is over? I don't care who you are. I pay for my tickets. I've earned my seat. People like me built the system that keeps airlines alive." The words "people like me" rang heavy in the air. Passengers stiffened. Some exchanged looks, their discomfort written plainly. Maya turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze. Her tone was still controlled, but colder now. "Mr. Barnes, what exactly do you mean by people like me?" Gregory blinked, realizing the trap, but pride pushed him forward. "I mean business travelers, frequent flyers, executives who understand value, not kids using first class like it's a playground." Maya didn't raise her voice, but every syllable landed like a weight. "You are mistaken. What keeps airlines alive are the millions of passengers' families, children, workers, elders who choose to fly. Respect isn't sold by the ticket. It is owed equally to every person on this plane." The cabin rippled with quiet applause from a handful of passengers. Zoe's eyes widened, surprised that strangers were clapping for her mother. Gregory flushed, his jaw tightening. "You think you're clever, don't you? Throwing words around, but you're not fooling me. You're just another woman trying to—" "Careful," Maya interrupted softly, her eyes narrowing. "Finish that sentence if you dare." He froze, caught between his instinct to lash out and the growing realization that the ground beneath him was collapsing. His hesitation was long enough for another voice to break in. "Sir," Elna said, stepping forward, "if you continue harassing passengers, I will have no choice but to involve airport security." "This is your last warning," Gregory scoffed, raising his phone like a shield. "Fine. Call them. I'll be the one filing the complaint. I'll make sure the world knows how this airline treats its loyal customers." He began recording, pointing the camera toward Maya and Zoe. "Everyone watching, take note. This airline gives away premium seats to people who don't even belong here." A wave of disgust passed through the cabin. A man in row 1 muttered, "Unbelievable." Another passenger hissed, "Turn it off." But Gregory kept filming. "See this. A child taking up space that should go to paying customers. And her mother," he jabbed a finger at. "Maya thinks she can intimidate me. Well, not today." Zoe shrank back into her mother's side, tears brimming again. Maya's hand rubbed soothing circles on her back. She leaned close, whispering into her ear, "Don't be afraid. He's already lost." Then she straightened, her gaze on Gregory steady as stone. "Mr. Barnes," she said, "you've recorded long enough. You should know something before you decide to share that video." Gregory smirked. "And what's that?" Maya held his stare, her voice calm but heavy with meaning. "You're pointing your camera at the wrong person. You should turn it on yourself, because what you've just captured is not proof of fraud, but evidence of your own prejudice. And when the world sees it, they won't question whether my daughter belongs here. They'll question how you thought you could treat a child this way." The silence after her words was electric. Gregory's smirk faltered. His hand wavered slightly. the phone still raised but less certain now. Then, from row 4, Thomas spoke again. "She's right. I've seen injustice in many forms, but never has it looked as pitiful as a grown man bullying an 11-year-old. Sir, you've embarrassed yourself more than anyone else could." The words drew another round of quiet applause, this time louder, more sustained. Even Elena allowed herself a faint smile. Gregory's face turned crimson. He lowered the phone abruptly, shoving it into his pocket. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "No," Maya replied softly, her arm around Zoe. "You will." For the first time, Gregory looked away. His bravado crumbled under the collective judgment of the cabin. He sank back into his seat, his fists clenched, his chest rising and falling in heavy breaths. But Maya knew men like him. Silence didn't mean surrender. It meant he was plotting his next move. She turned back to Zoe, brushing away a tear from her cheek. "It's almost over, sweetheart. I'm here now." The engines roared louder as the plane edged closer to the runway. But inside the cabin, the drama was only deepening. Passengers whispered, phones ready, waiting to see what would happen next. And Zoe, holding her mother's hand, felt the strange mixture of fear and pride. She had been shaken to her core, but she had also seen what it meant to stand tall in the face of cruelty. The jet engines thundered as Flight 227 reached the head of the runway. The cabin lights dimmed, the last quiet before takeoff. Yet in the front rows, quiet was impossible. The tension had become so thick that even children further back whispered questions to their parents. "What's happening up there? Why's that man yelling?" Maya Carter sat tall, her hand firmly holding Zoe's. Her daughter's small frame leaned into her side, the tremors in her shoulders betraying the strain of the last 30 minutes. Maya's calm presence was a shield, but she knew shields sometimes needed swords. Gregory Barnes had been silent for only a few minutes, his phone hidden away. But the silence was deceptive. His pride, wounded in front of strangers, was searching for a new weapon. As the plane accelerated, the vibration rattled trays and water cups. Zoe closed her eyes, whispering under her breath, "Please, let it be over." But as soon as the wheels lifted from the ground, Gregory leaned forward again. His voice, low but cutting, sliced through the hum of ascent. "Mark my words, people like you won't ruin this airline, not while I'm still flying." The words lodged like thorns. Maya turned slowly, meeting his stare. Her reply was calm, her tone almost surgical. "Mr. Barnes, what you fail to understand is that this airline does not belong to you. It belongs to everyone who boards it, pays for their seat, and expects dignity. And you've failed that standard tonight." Gregory smirked, but his eyes betrayed unease. "Dignity. You're going to lecture me on dignity when you're hiding behind what clever word sympathy from strangers," Maya said, her voice steady, "behind truth." The exchange caught the attention of nearly every passenger in earshot. People leaned forward, earbuds removed, watching the duel unfold like an unscripted play. Eleanor Ruiz stayed nearby, her instincts honed, ready to intervene if Gregory escalated further. Thomas Reed shook his head, muttering just loud enough. "Some men never learn. They mistake cruelty for strength." Gregory heard it. His head snapped toward Thomas. "And what would you know? Old man times have changed. People like me built this country, and now we're told to sit down while kids and their mothers waltz in and take over." Gas rippled through the cabin. A man across the aisle muttered, "He did not just say that." Maya's hand tightened on Zoe's. She could feel her daughter trembling harder now. She leaned down, whispering into Zoe's ear, "Breathe. You don't have to carry his ugliness. Just breathe." Zoe nodded faintly, clutching her mother's sleeve. Maya rose slightly in her seat, her voice clear and unwavering. "Mr. Barnes, enough. You've insulted a child, belittled fellow passengers, and undermined the crew. If you continue, I will ensure you're removed from this flight the moment we land." Gregory's laugh was sharp, brittle. "You ensure? You think you have that kind of power?" Maya didn't blink, more than you realize. The weight of her tone caught him off guard. For a moment, his bravado faltered, replaced by a flicker of doubt, but pride pushed him forward again. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded, his voice echoing off the cabin walls. Passengers sat frozen. Some phones tilted upward, recording. The atmosphere braced itself, waiting for the reveal. Maya leaned closer, her voice dropping just enough that the intimacy of her words became undeniable. "I am the one person on this plane you should never have challenged. Because you see, Mr. Barnes, this airline is mine." The words landed like thunder. Silence crashed through the cabin. Zoe blinked, stunned that her mother had said it aloud. Gregory's mouth fell open. "Yours? What are you talking about?" Maya straightened, her presence radiating the same quiet dominance she carried in boardrooms. "I am Maya Carter, CEO and majority owner of Phoenix Airlines. And you have spent the last 30 minutes humiliating my daughter in front of a cabin full of witnesses." The ripple of shock was immediate. Gasps, whispers, phones snapping upward for clearer footage. A woman in row 1 clapped once, involuntarily, then covered her mouth. Eleanor Ruiz blinked, stunned, but quickly recovering. Relief spread across her features. She knew now the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Gregory's face drained of color. He sputtered, That can't be true. You're lying." Maya's calm expression didn't waver. "You can check the website, or the press releases, or tomorrow's headlines, because every passenger here has just witnessed exactly why I've spent my career fighting for dignity in travel. And tonight, Mr. Barnes, you've become the example of what must change." Phones recorded every word, capturing the unfolding moment that would travel far beyond the confines of Flight 227. Gregory's chest rose and fell rapidly. His pride, once his armor, now felt like a cage. He could see it in the faces around him. Judgment, disappointment, disdain. The authority he had tried to wield had evaporated. Zoe leaned into her mother, whispering, "You told him—" Maya kissed her temple. He needed to know. Thomas Reed's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Justice," he murmured softly, "always finds its way." Gregory slumped back into his seat, his lips moving, but no words coming. For the first time that evening, he looked small. The cabin exhaled. The storm had broken, and as the plane soared into the night sky, the truth spread with it, carried in whispers, in phone screens, in the collective memory of every passenger on board. For a few suspended seconds, the cabin of Flight 227 was utterly still. The revelation hung in the air like thunder after lightning raw, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Phones hovered midair, passengers staring between Maya Carter and Gregory Barnes as though history had just shifted in a pressurized metal tube 30,000 feet above the ground. Gregory's lips moved, but sound failed him. His earlier arrogance drained from his face, replaced by the pallor of a man realizing he had miscalculated in ways that could never be undone. His seatbelt clicked as he shifted restlessly. trapped in the very seat he had once claimed as his prize. Across from him, Zoe Carter sat straighter than she had all evening. Her mother's words replayed in her mind. "This airline is mine." The fear that had been twisting inside her began to unravel, replaced by something steadier. She gripped Maya's hand, no longer out of desperation, but pride. Eleanor Ruiz, still standing near row 2, steadied herself with a deep breath. She had seen power struggles in cabins before over armrests, over overhead bins, over reclined seats, but never had she witnessed such a clean, devastating reversal. She found herself smiling, not as an employee, but as a woman who had just watched her CEO embody the very principles she preached. The murmurs began softly, then spread like wildfire. "She owns the airline." "No way, did you hear that?" "Oh my God, this guy picked the wrong person today." Phones angled higher, catching every angle of Gregory's discomfort. One young passenger whispered, "This is going viral." Gregory tried to recover. He straightened, puffing his chest, forcing a sneer. "Even if you are who you say you are, that doesn't excuse the way this airline treats loyal customers like me. Do you know how many miles I've flown? Do you know what my business brings to your bottom line?" Maya's eyes didn't waver. "Your loyalty is measured not only by the miles you've flown, Mr. Barnes, but by the respect you show others along the way. Tonight, you failed that test." Gasps of approval and scattered applause broke through the cabin. For once, Gregory looked around and saw no allies, only witnesses cataloging every second of his humiliation. Zoe's shoulders loosened. She whispered, "Mom, everyone's clapping for you." Maya squeezed her daughter's hand. "They're clapping for us, sweetheart. For truth. From row 4. Thomas Reed lifted his cane slightly and tapped it against the floor twice. A signal of solidarity. "Ms. Carter," he said loudly enough for all to hear, "tonight you didn't just defend your daughter. You defended every person who's ever been told they don't belong." The cabin hummed with agreement. A woman leaned forward, saying, "My son went through the same thing last year. They wouldn't let him sit in the seat he bought." "Thank you for saying what needed to be said." Gregory bristled, his pride clinging to the only thread left. "This is ridiculous. You're all ganging up on me. I didn't do anything wrong except ask for my seat." Elena's professional patience finally cracked. "No, Mr. Barnes. You didn't ask, you demanded. You didn't clarify, you insulted. And when presented with proof, you chose hostility instead of humility. That's not a seating issue. That's a character issue." The applause grew louder, uncontainable now. Gregory's fists clenched. He muttered under his breath, "This isn't over." Maya turned back toward him, her voice steady as iron. "It already is. For the rest of the flight." Gregory remained silent, but the cabin did not. Passengers whispered, recounted, shared their own experiences of being disrespected or underestimated. Strangers bonded over the shared sense that they had witnessed something larger than a dispute over a seat. Zoe leaned against her mother's shoulder, her eyelids heavy. For the first time since boarding, she felt safe. She whispered, "Mom, will everyone really know about this?" Maya brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Yes, and when they do, they'll see that you held your ground with dignity. You were brave." "Zoe?" Her daughter smiled faintly, drifting into sleep against her mother's side. Meanwhile, in the back of the cabin, screens lit up. Passengers uploaded clips to social media with captions like, "Man tries to steal seat from black child. Didn't know her mom owns the airline, and justice served midair." The comments began rolling in almost instantly. Strangers thousands of miles away, weighing in, their outrage and applause echoing across timelines. By the time Flight 227 reached cruising altitude, hashtags were already trending. Gregory Barnes' scowl, captured from 3 different angles, spread online like wildfire. Maya's calm reveal, her words about dignity belonging to everyone, replayed in clips stitched with commentary. This is how leadership looks. Helena returned to check on Maya quietly. "Ma'am," she said with a smile, "I know this wasn't the way you planned your evening, but I think your message just reached more people in 30 minutes than most CEOs manage in a year." Maya nodded slightly, her eyes on her sleeping daughter. "Sometimes life chooses the stage for you." Across the aisle, Gregory sat rigid, the reality of his mistake closing in. He could already imagine the fallout colleagues watching, his reputation shredded, the possibility that his worst moment would outlive his best achievements. And Maya, watching him from the corner of her eye, felt a pang of something unexpected, not pity, but recognition. She knew what unchecked pride could do to a person. She had seen men like him before, men who thought status excused cruelty. Tonight, his mask had cracked, and the world would not look away. As the plane cruised steadily above the clouds, it carried more than passengers. It carried a story, one born from conflict, elevated by truth, and destined to resonate far beyond the confines of row 2A. By the time Flight 227 had leveled off at 35,000 feet, the cabin was alive with quiet whispers, smartphones quietly capturing every angle of the unfolding drama. Clips of Gregory Barnes' angry outbursts and Maya Carter's calm. Measured responses had already begun circulating among passengers. By the time the beverage cart passed, several passengers were uploading content to social media. Maya remained seated with Zoe, her posture relaxed but vigilant. She was aware of the significance of the moment, not just for her daughter, but for every passenger who had witnessed the confrontation. This wasn't simply a personal vindication. It was an opportunity to set a precedent. Elena Ruiz moved discreetly up and down the aisle, ensuring the passengers remained composed. She could see the ripple effects of what had transpired, even a few rows back. Young travelers whispered about what they had seen, their faces alight with excitement and newfound awareness. Gregory Barnes slouched in his seat, phone now clutched loosely in his hand. The initial flush of indignation had given way to anxiety. His mind raced through every potential fallout scenario, colleagues seeing the videos, his employer's reaction, the social media backlash he couldn't control. He muttered under his breath, "This can't be happening." From the galley, Elena leaned slightly toward Maya. "Ma'am, the uploads are already trending. People are recording your words, your explanation about dignity and respect. It's not just passengers anymore. This is reaching the outside world." Maya's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Good," she said softly. "It's important that the right message gets out." She glanced down at Zoe, who had finally relaxed into her mother's side, her iPad momentarily forgotten. "You know," Maya whispered, brushing a loose curl from her daughter's face, "today you helped teach people something very important. You were brave." Zoe's eyes glimmered with a mixture of pride and fatigue. "Mom, do you think he'll learn?" Maya sighed gently. "He might, but even if he doesn't, everyone else will." The cabin monitors began to flicker as the in-flight Wi-Fi connection picked up. Passengers' phones were buzzing with notifications, likes, comments, shares, and retweets spreading faster than anyone could have anticipated. A hashtag was already forming. Nyaur, Carter Airline Justice. Gregory's phone buzzed. Hesitantly, he looked down to see notifications from social media apps flooding his screen. Hundreds of comments tagging him. His name associated with the phrase racial harassment in bold. His heart sank. The weight of public scrutiny descended rapidly, heavier than any flight turbulence he had ever experienced. He glanced toward Maya, whose eyes met his across the aisle, calm, unyielding. Every glance was a reminder of the power imbalance he had misjudged. From row 4, Thomas Reed shook his head, muttering quietly, "Power without purpose leads to downfall." Meanwhile, Elena moved toward the cockpit door, quietly communicating with the captain. She ensured that the flight deck was aware of the situation, emphasizing that it had escalated into a matter of safety and passenger dignity. The plane's gentle hum was punctuated by the occasional click of a camera, the whispers of passengers, and the soft, steady breathing of Zoe as she absorbed the surreal moment. Within 20 minutes, several flight attendants discreetly updated headquarters via the internal communications system. By the time the flight attendants reached Phoenix Airlines' customer relations team, the story had already gone viral. Videos captured from multiple angles, paired with audio of Maya's precise words, were being shared across corporate channels, industry forums, and social media platforms simultaneously. Maya leaned closer to Zoe and whispered, "This isn't just about the seat, Zoe. It's about fairness, respect, and standing up for what's right. Remember this feeling." Zoe nodded, absorbing every word. Even at 11, she began to understand the deeper lesson: dignity was universal, and courage could take many forms. Back in 3C, Gregory was increasingly pale. He scrolled through notifications that confirmed the worst of his fears. His employer had been tagged repeatedly. Colleagues had already begun sending private messages expressing shock and disapproval. He felt the creeping realization that his professional reputation, carefully cultivated over decades, was now on the line. Elena quietly informed the cockpit that security intervention might be necessary upon landing if Gregory continued to challenge crew authority or passenger safety. The captain nodded, appreciating the foresight. Meanwhile, Maya addressed the cabin, her voice carrying with quiet authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank each of you for your patience and for witnessing this event. We are committed to the dignity and respect of every passenger aboard Phoenix Airlines. Discriminatory behavior will not be tolerated, and we hope today's incident reinforces that principle." The cabin responded with quiet nods, murmurs of approval, and subdued applause. Zoe smiled faintly, squeezing her mother's hand. Gregory, realizing his options were rapidly diminishing, muttered under his breath, "This isn't over. You can't ruin me like this." Maya's gaze flicked toward him, steady and uncompromising. "It's not about ruining anyone, Mr. Barnes. It's about accountability, something you will experience soon enough, I'm sure." As the plane reached cruising altitude, the viral nature of the incident continued to amplify. Notifications of the video spread beyond social media into news platforms, industry newsletters, and internal corporate communication channels. Employees of Phoenix Airlines began sharing the video, praising Maya's composure and leadership. Passengers who witnessed the confrontation began conversing quietly with one another, discussing the lessons of respect, accountability, and courage they had seen firsthand. The incident had transformed the cabin into a microcosm of societal reflection. One flight, countless perspectives, and a powerful example of standing up against entitlement and prejudice. Zoe, leaning against her mother, whispered, "Do you think people will remember me?" Maya kissed the top of her head. "They'll remember what courage looks like, You showed it today." As the flight continued across the United States, Gregory's internal turmoil grew. He stared blankly out the window, the clouds outside bright and serene, a stark contrast to the storm raging within him. The consequences of his actions were spreading beyond his immediate awareness, and the gravity of the situation was settling in like a lead weight. Passengers continued to watch, some recording, some simply witnessing the lesson in real time. Maya remained calm, a beacon of authority, protecting her daughter and reinforcing the principle that dignity cannot be purchased or demanded. It is inherent and must be respected. By the time Flight 227 approached its first-hour mark, social media was already alive with commentary, reactions, and sharing. The world beyond the cabin began to witness what the passengers had just lived through. Gregory Barnes, once confident and entitled, was now facing the very public and immediate consequences of his actions, a cautionary tale unfolding midair. As Flight 227 began its descent toward Phoenix International Airport, the atmosphere in the cabin had transformed. Passengers who had been tense, whispering and gripping armrests, now leaned forward with anticipation, phones ready, as if to witness the final chapter of an unfolding drama. Maya Carter remained seated with Zoe at her side, her presence steady and commanding, a quiet anchor amid the lingering ripple of excitement and tension. Zoe watched the ground draw nearer through her window, the sprawling cityscape dotted with shimmering lights. "Mom, will he really face consequences?" she asked softly, her voice a mixture of curiosity and lingering worry. Maya adjusted her daughter's seatbelt and looked out at the runway ahead. "Yes, Zoe, actions have consequences. What he did tonight wasn't just wrong. It was harmful. People will hold him accountable, and that includes me ensuring it happens appropriately." She placed a reassuring hand over Zoe's. "And you showed incredible courage. Never forget that." Gregory Barnes remained slouched in his seat, glancing nervously at the crew, the other passengers, and most of all, at Maya. His face bore the pallor of someone who had realized too late that his behavior had immediate and far-reaching consequences. He tried to collect himself, but the knowledge that videos of his tirade were circulating online weighed on him heavily. Elena Ruiz checked her watch and subtly tapped her earpiece, communicating with airport security to ensure a smooth handoff upon landing. "Ms. Carter," she said quietly, "security will meet us on the jet bridge. They've been briefed on the situation and are prepared to escort Mr. Barnes if necessary." Maya nodded subtly. She didn't need to elevate her voice to command authority. The mere calm in her tone sufficed. She wanted the landing and subsequent actions to be controlled, decisive, and above all, dignified. Passengers whispered among themselves, sharing their impressions of the events that had unfolded. "I've never seen anything like this," one woman murmured to her husband. "She didn't yell. She didn't lose her composure. But she made him understand, without ever raising her voice, that what he did was unacceptable." Thomas Reed, seated a few rows back, observed the exchange with quiet satisfaction. "That's the power of measured authority," he said, leaning slightly toward Elena. "It doesn't need to shout to command respect. It simply commands." His eyes flicked toward Gregory, whose hands fidgeted nervously in his lap. "And some people will never understand until they feel the weight of accountability." As the wheels of the aircraft touched down with a smooth thrum, passengers clapped spontaneously. The tension broke, replaced by an energy of triumph and relief. Maya kept her hand on Zoe's, feeling her daughter's small fingers tremble with residual adrenaline and pride. This was more than a landing. It was a symbolic closure to the confrontation, a passage from chaos to calm, from conflict to clarity. As the aircraft taxied to the gate, Elena and the cabin crew prepared for the next phase, addressing Gregory Barnes' behavior directly. Security personnel, already briefed, were waiting just beyond the jet bridge doors. Maya allowed a brief pause, letting Gregory comprehend the situation fully before the next step. Upon arrival at the gate, the lead security officer approached, and Elena gestured toward Gregory. "Sir, we need you to follow us. This is standard procedure for incidents involving harassment or disruptive behavior." Gregory stood abruptly, indignation replacing panic momentarily. "I am not going anywhere. I am a loyal customer." "This is absurd," Maya rose, her height and calm authority immediately cutting through the tension. "Mr. Barnes, your actions have consequences. You have harassed a child, created distress for passengers and crew, and refused to follow protocol. Security is here to ensure that accountability is observed. There is no negotiation in this matter." Passengers watching the scene unfold through cabin windows and from within their seats murmured in agreement. Many recorded the events, knowing the gravity of the moment extended far beyond the aircraft. Cameras captured the solemnity and poise of Maya Carter as she escorted Zoe to ensure her safety, while remaining directly engaged with security personnel regarding Gregory. Gregory's defiance crumbled as he faced the professionalism and authority of the security team. Reluctantly, he began to comply, his voice faltering as he muttered excuses and protests, none of which held weight in the face of the unyielding presence of Maya and the trained officers. Once Gregory was escorted off the plane, the cabin erupted not with chaos, but with applause, soft smiles, and whispered congratulations to Maya. The passengers had witnessed a rare and profound assertion of justice and integrity in a setting where entitlement had been challenged and decisively corrected. As the passengers began to disembark, many approached Maya discreetly, expressing gratitude for her actions and recounting their own experiences of witnessing or enduring similar discrimination. Elena helped coordinate this interaction, ensuring that Maya could engage meaningfully without being overwhelmed, balancing her responsibilities as a mother, CEO, and exemplar of dignity. Zoe, still close at her mother's side, whispered, "Mom, did everyone see what you did?" Maya smiled down at her daughter, her eyes softening. "Yes, Zoe, and more importantly, everyone saw how you stood your ground. That's what matters most." By the time the final passengers had exited the aircraft, Phoenix Airlines' social media team had already begun documenting the incident, compiling videos and accounts from passengers to frame the narrative responsibly, highlighting dignity, accountability, and leadership under pressure. Back in the airport terminal, news crews were beginning to arrive. Alerted by the viral nature of the online videos, Maya, with Zoe at her side, prepared to make statements that would contextualize the event, ensuring that the story emphasized lessons of respect, fairness, and the inherent dignity owed to every passenger. Gregory Barnes' professional fate was sealed. His employer had already been contacted through Phoenix Airlines' legal department, and statements were prepared to address the misconduct. Industry colleagues began discussing the incident as a cautionary tale of entitlement unchecked by accountability, and the digital traces ensured that his actions would be remembered widely. Maya, observing the ripple effects, felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The evening had tested her composure, her strategy, and her ability to protect not only her daughter, but the principles she had built her career upon. As they moved through the terminal, she reflected silently. Courage and dignity are contagious, and the consequences of injustice, once revealed, are unavoidable. The terminal at Phoenix International was buzzing with activity, yet amidst the crowd, Maya Carter moved with a composed grace, Zoe clinging lightly to her hand. The ordeal of Flight 227 had ended physically, but its ripples were only beginning to spread across social media, news outlets, and the aviation industry. As they walked through the terminal, passengers who had witnessed the confrontation approached them respectfully. "Ms. Carter," one woman said, holding out her phone. "Thank you for handling that situation." It was inspiring to see dignity triumph over entitlement. Maya offered a small smile and nod, encouraging but understated. She was careful not to draw attention away from her daughter, who had been through more emotional turbulence than anyone could quantify. Zoe looked up at her mother. "Mom, will everyone know what happened?" "They will, Zoe," Maya replied, "and the lesson will reach far beyond this airport." Elena Ruiz followed close behind, guiding them to a quiet lounge where they could catch a moment of respite. She had ensured security had met all passengers involved in the incident, and that media access was controlled. "The video is already trending nationwide," Elena reported softly. "Corporate channels, social media, news outlets. They're picking it up faster than we anticipated." Maya nodded, folding her hands over Zoe's. "Good. It's important the story is framed correctly, not just as an incident, but as a teaching moment about respect, about accountability, and about power used wisely." Back in his own car, Gregory Barnes sat in stunned silence. The public shaming had begun even before the plane had landed. His social media accounts were flooded with clips of his outburst. His colleagues and clients were contacting him, some in disbelief, others with veiled warnings. For the first time in decades, he felt powerless in a way that was both humbling and terrifying. Meanwhile, at Phoenix Airlines headquarters, Maya's executive team convened quickly. Legal counsel, communications, and HR were all coordinating a response. The objective was clear: support Maya's actions, protect Zoe, and leverage the incident as a catalyst for broader industry reforms. Maya addressed the team calmly. "We will not just react. We will act proactively. This is a chance to set a precedent: zero tolerance for discrimination, full transparency, and education. Elena will assist in training and policy reinforcement. We will also ensure Mr. Barnes is held accountable in the ways appropriate under law and industry standards." Elena nodded, her eyes reflecting both pride and relief. She had navigated turbulent situations before, but nothing like this. Watching Maya manage both the immediate conflict and the broader implications had been instructive. Zoe, meanwhile, had settled into the lounge chair with her iPad, glancing occasionally at the adults around her. "Mom, do you think kids will understand why this was important?" Maya crouched beside her daughter. "They will. Zoe, seeing you stand your ground, seeing me protect you, seeing others speak up, that's a story that resonates. People will remember courage, not fear." Across the country, the video of Flight 227 was dissected by commentators, shared by families, and discussed in boardrooms. The hashtag #Zoe Carter Airline Justice became a symbol of dignity, accountability, and the potential for social change within corporate culture. CEO forums discussed it as a case study in leadership under pressure, emphasizing how calm authority and strategic intervention could turn a chaotic situation into an educational moment for millions. Gregory Barnes, isolated and reflective, began contacting lawyers and consultants. But even before the calls began, he understood the scope of his miscalculation. This was no longer a private embarrassment. It was a public reckoning. His reputation, carefully built over decades, now lay in ruins, overshadowed by his own actions. broadcast to millions, Maya and her executive team, however, focused on the constructive outcome. Policies were drafted immediately to prevent similar incidents. Phoenix Airlines announced new training modules for all staff, emphasizing the recognition of entitlement, discrimination, and the tools to de-escalate conflict while upholding passenger dignity. Elena Ruiz was asked to lead training sessions, her first-hand experience invaluable. In the following days, the media coverage expanded beyond the incident itself. Analysts wrote about systemic entitlement, societal assumptions, and unconscious bias. Interviews with Maya emphasized how leadership extends beyond profit margins. It includes responsibility to protect those vulnerable to prejudice and harassment. Zoe listened quietly as her mother discussed the situation in interviews with reporters. She saw how words could shape understanding, how calm and well-considered statements could carry more weight than any tantrum or aggression. "Mom," she whispered, "people are watching everything you say." "Yes," Maya replied, "and that's why we must be careful, thoughtful, and fair. Influence is powerful. It must be used for good." Gregory's attempts at damage control began to falter as more companies reconsidered their professional relationships with him. Corporate clients questioned whether they could continue partnerships with someone whose public conduct so clearly contradicted professional ethics. He realized that the consequences were not only personal, but systemic. Meanwhile, the passengers of Flight 227 who had recorded or witnessed the event continued to share their perspectives. Families discussed it with their children, highlighting lessons of respect, accountability, and courage. Professional forums dissected it as an exemplary case study in crisis management and ethical leadership. Zoe, reflecting quietly, said to her mother, "I think I understand now. It's not just about the seat. It's about how we treat people." Maya smiled, brushing her daughter's hair from her eyes. "Exactly. And every time someone sees courage, justice, or fairness, they're reminded that dignity matters, not just in air travel, Zoe, but everywhere." As the news coverage expanded, Phoenix Airlines' proactive approach was widely praised. Maya's decision to calmly handle the confrontation, reveal her authority strategically, and implement lasting measures made her a role model not only in aviation, but across corporate America. Passengers continued to share their experiences, highlighting the professionalism of Elena Ruiz, the composure of Maya, and the courage of Zoe. The incident became more than a viral moment. It was a social lesson, a case study, and a moral touchstone. Gregory Barnes, isolated and reflective, finally understood the lesson too late. A lifetime of entitlement could be dismantled in 30 minutes of unchecked prejudice. Meanwhile, Maya Carter and Zoe had emerged not only unscathed, but strengthened, their actions sending ripples of justice, courage, and dignity far beyond the confines of Flight 227. The story of Zoe and Maya Carter offers profound lessons that extend far beyond the cabin of Flight 227. At its heart, it reminds us that dignity and respect are not privileges. They are rights inherent to every person, regardless of age, race, or status. The courage to stand up against entitlement and discrimination, even in moments of fear, can ripple far beyond the immediate situation, influencing observers and inspiring systemic change. Maya Carter's measured, strategic response demonstrates the power of calm authority in the face of injustice, showing that influence and responsibility must be exercised thoughtfully. Zoe's bravery, guided by her mother's example, illustrates that even children can embody courage and resilience. For older audiences, the story underscores the importance of role models and mentorship, the necessity of confronting prejudice, and the long-term impact of ethical leadership. It invites reflection on how we respond when confronted with injustice, Do we remain silent, or do we act with integrity? Ultimately, it reminds us that actions taken with principle and compassion can transform moments of conflict into lessons for generations, shaping not just our immediate environment, but the broader community. Thank you for watching and sharing in this powerful story. If it moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring inspiring stories of courage, justice, and dignity to viewers everywhere.